Hello, this is CodeJoy Chess Tutorials, and I'm going to go over a game I just played. It was a 30-minute game. These are my stats and my different time controls. The longer time I have, the better I am. Right now, I'm below 2,000, unfortunately, so I'm trying to get back up to 2,000. Uh, uh, 2,000th in the world, I'm already at. I've been in the top 1,000. I've been to the point where people spectate my games because they're the highest rated game being played on the website. But yeah, maybe my goal should be 1700 bullet, 1800 blitz, which isn't hard. I just was there. And then 1900 rapid and 2000 classical. 2200 puzzles, I guess. Okay, but let's get into the game. And I'm going to teach you how. We'll just leave the moves there. No need for suspense. Okay, but why do I do what I do? I play d4. And I might call this how to win with white. d4 if I'm trying to win. Okay? This is the first classical game I've had time to play in weeks, and I know I need to win in order to get up to 2000. This guy's an 1866 question mark. Maybe it was higher before this game, but question mark means he's dangerous. It means the computer doesn't know how to rate him because he hasn't played very many games. But someone who hasn't played very many games and is at this level is most likely this is their second account, or they're like a grandmaster just like playing on someone else's account, or like a little genius kid. Um, anyway, they're dangerous. So who knows what he's rated? So he plays a suboptimal defense. So I play d4, he plays knight f6, and this is the best reply to d4 because it prevents e4. Now, if I could move twice in a row, I would play d4, e4, because you want these pawns up two squares in the middle because it gets your bishop's lanes to work with, and you want to control the center of the board so that you can get your pieces into the center and then they can do more damage from there. They can play offense and defense simultaneously from the center. Okay, so I play c4. Like, you won't let me take e4, I'll take c4. So now I'm controlling these four squares, and my queen has an avenue out this way. Also, the purpose of this move is the knight can hop behind it, and the knight will not restrict that move later if I ever want to play it. So now he lashes out in the center, and this is suboptimal because I can take. And normally you want to prepare d5 with a move like e6 or c6, because then when you play e5 and I take, you can take back with the pawn because you want your pawns in the center. Okay, so he's just playing dynamically, and now you can take with the queen or the knight. Or you could, better yet, not take it all and try to win it back with a pawn. And if I take, like if he played c6 and I took, and then he could play knight takes, then he would have two knights and a queen ready to go and against just my queen. Even though he's black and down a pawn, he'd be up in development. But instead he chooses to take. So now we're equal materially, except I've exchanged a c pawn for a d pawn, which means I have two center pawns and he only has one. Also, um, this knight is immediately a target to, now I get to play e4 because he's no longer stopping that, and it comes with a tempo because now the knight is under attack and he doesn't have anywhere amazing to go. So he chooses to go back to go here, which is probably the best spot for it. If you go here, I can just attack it again so later. So this is a good spot for it. However, it's not ideal to move your knight three times like this, you know? So I'm winning already. So here, if he takes with the queen, the problem with that move is it's not threatening anything because this pawn is defended by my queen, and it would allow my knight to come out where it wants to go. See, this pawn wants to be on e4, and this knight wants to be on c3. and whichever way he takes this back, I get to play my move. If he took with the queen, I would play knight c3, and I would attack the queen. And then the queen would have to go back, and then I could even get e4 in, because the knight would protect that, depending on where the queen goes. But anyway, he plays like this. He's not getting crushed or anything, but it's slight advantages. If you do enough of those, eventually you're crushing. Okay, so this move is e6. Should have played that earlier, so his pawn could have supported his push. But the idea of this is he wants to get his bishop out and castle. Unfortunately, it blocks his other bishop in. You'll notice that neither of my bishops are blocked. Okay, and he could have developed a knight here, but maybe he wants this pawn to stop my pawn from hitting that knight and making it jump around. So that pawn move is okay. Then I play knight f3 because I also want a castle. And since I've already blown up my queen side over here, castling queen side would leave the king on c1 with an open door to attack him. So I play knight f3. Now I was thinking about f4 here just because take a massive center. Problem with f4 is it allows queen check. And even on that, I was thinking I could play g3, and then the queen would go back. But then it would go back to like here or here. But then it would just be difficult to defend, difficult to castle and monitor all my weaknesses. So knight f3 is a good move, protects this pawn extra, and prevents queen ever coming this direction, and also prepares castling, and it has no weakness. It has no downside, I should say, because this pawn doesn't really want to be on f4 because the king wants to castle, and this pawn protects the king on g1 from a diagonal attack. So this is like a wall. You can move this pawn one space to get your king out in sometimes, but I like 3 pawns like this and a king behind it is smart. So knight out. Okay, so this, he plays super conservatively here. As black, having your knight on the other side and you don't have a knight here anymore and you have no center pawns really, and he's playing super passively. He's all in his back 3 rows, whereas look at me, I'm taking as much space as possible. So here, I could just bring my bishop out and castle. I could bring this bishop out or this bishop out to any of these squares. But I choose g3 because I have time for g3. Because I know he's going to castle next move, and then I'll have time for bishop g2. And then no matter what happens, my position is so solid, I'll be able to castle. And it's like, if I'm going to castle, I might as well fianchetto my bishop. Fianchetto. And you'll see why. And that's part of the reason for this tutorial is some of my students, they don't see the value in fianchettoing, but I will show you. Okay, so now with this pawn here, it's even better than playing h3 and castling with a flight square because the bishop here is a monster if you understand how to use it. Okay, so, and he's I want to say unexpendable. He's invaluable. You never trade this bishop if you do this maneuver. You keep this bishop until he's ready to win the game. That's the only time you trade him. Okay, so he hops out, and like I said, there's no threat because my knight and queen are already guarding this, so he's not gaining a tempo. I had time for this slow maneuver. That's the only downside of this castling tactic is it takes a few moves, but once you get it done, it's superior to what he's doing. Okay? So here, people say, when do I castle? First chance you get, castling is sometimes a good move. Especially in these long games where we're thinking a lot per move. I always try to castle and just get out of any future danger. Okay, so we both castle. Now, in this position, I could do something aggressive, but I'm just thinking about how bad his position is and ways for him to improve it. And I think even back on this move, he should have played the bishop out and pinned the knight and exchanged it at some point, or just kind of messed with me. But instead, he played super passively, and now that we're in this position, I'm going to play here because it serves two purposes. It doesn't let the bishop come here ever, and it doesn't let the knight come here ever. So it's a double move. And I can also play b4 in some variations, and it's supported. If I had played b4 here, the knight and the bishop control this square. So by playing a3, I control this square. The knight and the bishop are two pieces, but neither of them can fight as well for this square as a pawn. Pawns control squares better than anything because if the knight goes here, pawn takes. Bishop takes. Congratulations, you're down a piece. So pawns are better than anything else at square control because you can win in exchange. A pawn for a piece in a trade, you're always winning if you have the pawn. Okay, so now he's like, well, I can't go this way really, so I'm going to go this way. And this is queen, knight, and bishop all attacking this pawn. And this is the perfect opportunity to play e5. And I don't just play it instinctively because I see the bishop and force him back. It's a long-term decision, and I'm okay with making this move because my bishop on g2 wants that move to be played. Because my bishop doesn't want to look at its own pawn. It's always going to want to see all these light squares, and it wants to control all of them. So this move not only attacks the bishop and defends the d pawn, but in the future, I know that I just gained a huge advantage because my bishop is going to be a killer. And that's one of the good things about a3 is I'm not just pushing this immediately. I'm waiting for a tempo gaining push. And now he's really down. Okay, so here, this was an interesting part of the game where I'm like thinking, okay, now what? Like, if you're not a chess expert, I'm a chess expert. I was thinking, now what do I do? You know, this is the middle game conundrum. Well, you want to get your bishop developed so you can bring your rooks and connect them and, you know, complete development. Right now, my development is not completed. My bishop is still in the back. So I bring him out to his best square. If I go to f4, he has g5, and then when I move, he has g4, and then my knight has to move. That's a lot of moves for me to have to calculate to play that, and he can play that whenever he wants, so I don't like it. Like if this knight ever became important, he could attack my bishop, attack my knight, and then all of a sudden the knight is not doing its job. So I play here with the idea of it's a good spot for the bishop, but I knew the problem is he has knight to here. Like if you look at in this position, what squares does he control? What options does he have to move forward? Well, he can play bishop here. That's depressing. He can play queen to here. That's also depressing. Queen here, rook here. Rook here is okay, but queen here is not that good. This knight's blocking this pawn, which is blocking this bishop from developing. This rook can't move. So he doesn't have a lot of mobility. His best piece is this knight, and its best square is here. Because if it goes here, nothing is, it's just up in my territory, and I can't easily kick it out without weakening my structure, because then my knight would be weak, and his bishop and queen could target it in some variations, and this pawn would be weak because it's no longer being supported. So that's his best move forward, but not just for no reason. It has to come with a hit for it to be good. So when he plays here, now if I play b3 to try to kick it out, it doesn't go back, it takes my bishop. And then he sees what he can do with the bishop pair. If you don't know what to do, a lot of the times a good strategy is I'm going to you move your knight into their territory, take a bishop. Sometimes they can't prevent it. And once you've exchanged knight for bishop, then you try to use your bishop pair in the long game to dominate him. Like whichever bishop you have that he doesn't, you can center your game plan around that, and that's how you can get an advantage. Okay, but he plays here, and now I think this is one of my best moves in the game, is recognizing that I should have played queen to, even though you want to get the bishop out first and have your major pieces all talking to each other, bishop can't get out without it being hit by the knight. Even if I went to here, he would just play knight here. So bishop, the queen needs to fight for this square. So I should have played queen to here, or queen to here, or queen to here. Any queen move that takes away this square, then I can play my bishop out, and then his knight can't come. So I realized that after I moved this, I'm like, man, I shouldn't have allowed this. So I just go back because he's attacking this pawn and this bishop, and I can't defend both without undeveloping. But that's the best move there because I'm so ahead and have such a good long-term position. It's okay that I blundered this move. I'm just going to go back. And now I can play b3 because pawn and rook protect this pawn that the knight and bishop are attacking, and he'll have to go back. So it's just a really practical decision. And now this bishop or this knight has nowhere to go, even though he's improved his position and that's his best piece now. I can slowly, work around it. So I can't let him do that exchange because then he would have something in an imbalance to work with. So now he plays knight to here, thinking that in some variations, if I play the queen to attack his knight, he can play his knight in to attack my rook. So, tricky situation. In a perfect world, I would move my queen so that it's attacking the knight, because this is a tactical liability I was trying to take advantage of, because I'm thinking I have the move b4. b4 forces the knight to move. If I can control the square that the knight's moving to and force him to have to go back, then this knight would be undefended. So in a perfect world, I would move the queen here, be attacking this knight, and then play this move. And then when he moves the knight away, I would win the knight. And that's a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world, and this guy's too smart to let that happen. So I decided just b4 immediately, because now he's wasted a move, because he can't come in, and although it's not winning this knight has to go back, and now he's wasted a move because he went here, then I went here, and then he goes back. And sometimes you can do that, and as black you can waste moves like that to cause pawn weaknesses, but this pawn push, when he made my pawn move by doing bishop back and forth, that opens up my bishop. And here, this maneuver, it opens up my bishop in this direction, and also it opens up my rook. So also I have b5 to attack this knight whenever I want. And the only downside to b4 is it doesn't protect the knight, but the knight is not under attack and cannot be easily attacked in this position. So now this is my favorite, one of my favorite moves in this game, rook up. And this is really good stuff, because if you look at my position, the worst thing about my position is that my bishop is undeveloped. He's stuck to the defense of this pawn, kind of, and if he moves, the knight will take him, and if he moves out here, he gets attacked. So there's really nowhere for him to go, nothing for him to do, and he's preventing this rook from being buddies with its other rook. You always need the rooks to work together, otherwise you really don't know how to play chess. They're just so far better when they work together and they're connected. So you have to get this bishop out of the way of the rooks connecting. However, it's impossible. So I play rook a2, which is a great move because now suddenly the rook has all these squares to work with. And he can go here, and well, not here because the knight protects it, but he can go here, and this rook can go here, and we can double up here. It's just a really good move because now the bishop is happy here. The bishop is developed now. Like undeveloped bishop, developed bishop. So this move is about the bishop because now the bishop can sit here all game and he's not bothering any of my pieces. He's beautiful. Like if you imagine the rook goes here and then back, the bishop is fine here because his presence in the back row is not disconnecting. And the reason connecting is so important is it in some variations, like if you imagine this knight takes on this pawn, I can't take back without the queen getting lost. And luckily my rook is connected to my, like if I hadn't castled, if I had just marched my king over here and the rook was still over here, in that variation, my queen would be lost. That's why you have to have your pieces talking to each other. So in any variation, and you'll see that later in the game, when he plays queen takes queen, I just have simply rook takes. Okay, so rook up, and he plays a6 with the idea of b4. So he realizes that his best piece is here, and my strategy is going to be to attack it because it's not defended. And if he tries to defend it with b4, my knight will just take it. So he plays a3, saying, haha, now when you attack my knight with like a queen up, let's say, then he has b4. He's like, I have b4, and my knight can stay here all game, and I'll win because my knight is further than your knights. And I play rook e1 here with the idea that this was a defensive move. I started to realize in some variations, this pawn, let me see if I can figure this out. I remember I played that because of a defensive idea where, okay, my queen's undefended if it goes up here. So hypothetically, if I attacked the knight right now with queen to d3, he would play knight takes pawn and attack my queen. And if I played knight takes knight to stop the attack on my queen, he would play knight takes knight. Let's just show this because you probably can't picture that. Okay, if I played queen d3, he would play this. I'm attacking his knight. It looks like it has nowhere good to go, but he wins a pawn because now I can't take the knight because the queen takes my queen. I've lost the game. I've lost my queen. And if I take this way, he just does it again. And I can't take because my queen is lost. That's why this pawn, although it looks like it's defended by a pawn, it's actually not because my queen is hanging in all these variations. So that's why that's why I play rook e1. Okay. So now that's some pretty advanced stuff to recognize that he has a crazy tactical bomb on me if I play a normal move like attacking the knight with the queen. But I recognize that, play e1 to prevent that. Now I can attack it because if he takes, I have enough defenders without having to take with the pawn. Okay, so now he plays queen up, and he's blocking his bishop, but he's like, dude, I'm going to play b5 and play bishop b7 and be okay and have a good knight and a good position. And he's not wrong. It's the best move by him. And now I wish I didn't have the computer doing what it's doing right now. Let me go back. Okay. Okay, so rook e1, queen. Okay, so he plays queen here with his plan, right? And now my knight, oh, I gotta plug this in. My knight is, it's no longer attacking this square because this pawn protects it. So he's going to play b5, and there's nothing I can do about it. Also, my plan with rook e1, in some way, I was also thinking I can get away with d5. And if he takes it, I can take it. And that's how I can get my knight into the game and kind of just move forward. And e5 removes the defender of d5 removes the defense of e5. That's why I was also adding extra defense to e5. So it was offensive and defensive. But now in this new position, I just realized, hey, this queen can be hit by knight to here. And knight to here is good because if he takes it with the bishop, I have pawn takes, and then I can just beat him with the bishop pair. Anytime you can get your knight in an enemy's position so much that he has to exchange a bishop for it, then you can beat him with the bishop pair, like I said before. I mean, that's my strategy. That's how I got to 2,000, is just bishop play. Okay, so I hop my knight into e4, which is this cozy square, blocks my bishop, but not permanently because knights are super mobile. Like, there's no way I can't move this knight or this knight to get my bishop going. If anything, it's better to have knights in front of your bishop because you can do a double attack where you move the knight, and you'll see that later in the game. So here he lashes out and attacks my knight. Not a good move, but he should probably play b5 and continue with this plan, but instead he makes his first major mistake, and plays this move. Now, in this position, it's an interesting move because he probably saw my plan of knight c5. I could still, in this position, play knight c5 and attack his queen. And he would either move his queen out of the way or play bishop takes. But then he would have stopped. I don't know, he just has a lot going on here on the king side. So instead, I'm like, you can't do that, because if I take en passant, which I do, and that's one of the good things about having your pawns up like here, a lot of the times en passant is good for you. And that's why the rule's there, is to not allow moves like this. It's like, hey, you can't walk right by my soldier to attack my knight. I take you en passant. If you don't know what that is, look it up. My pawn controls this square, so if he tries to go through it like lightning, I have the option to take it, but only that move. This is my only chance, and I take it because if he takes with bishop, I'll just take the bishop, and like I said, I'll win that way. If he takes with the rook, I'll take the rook. So if he takes with the pawn, then this pawn is lost to bishop takes pawn. So no matter what he does, I'm getting a good deal out of it. That's why I took en passant, and that's why I take the bishop. Now he plays rook takes, and now I'm thinking, okay, this rook is a liability here. It's a little out in my position. I can attack it with the bishop in some variations, or the pawn will attack it if I put a piece here, and it's lost. Okay, so now I play rook. This rook, moving it up was good, but only if you realize that you also have to move it sideways, because it's disconnected right here. But moving it here, now the queen is defending it, and it's I couldn't move it here because the knight controls these dark squares, but here it comes with an attack on the knight. Okay, and anytime you can make a developing move that's good for your long-term position, but it also comes with an attack and a tempo, that's good because you're controlling the fight. And now he has to react to my move. He cannot fortify his knight with his other knight because I control those squares. So he does his plan. He plays b5. And now this rook move looks silly because I'm biting a rock. I cannot attack this knight without losing my rook. And his pawn is protecting his knight. And he's getting ready to fianchetto his bishop, and we would be in an equal position. And this is the critical moment of the game because his bishop is still undeveloped. It's preventing his rook from connecting with his other rook. If you put his bishop here and his rook here, he would be winning or tied. But because I'm ahead on development and my bishop in the back row is very different than his because I moved my rook around, I have too much activity here and I have a kill shot. And the kill shot is knight e5. Now, it looks impossible because it looks interesting. You might consider it because it comes with an attack on the queen. However, it also looks impossible because the knight controls this square and the knight controls this square. So also the knight stops defending this pawn. The knight and the queen are attacking this pawn. So anywhere the knight moves, this pawn is lost. But because I come with an attack on the queen, he doesn't have time to really win this pawn, because if he wins it with the knight, then I take his queen, and he can take my rook, but a queen is better than a rook. If he takes with the queen, which is what he does in the game, I can just take his knight. If he moves the queen, I will take his knight. If he moves the queen and tries to hang on to the knight, I will take his knight anyways, because as you can see, the bishop attacks the knight indirectly. So when I attack the queen and the knight, I'm also attacking this long diagonal. And look at what a monster my bishop is. His is undeveloped, and mine is attacking his knight and his rook. If he moves the knight, I win the rook. Also, if he tries to take my knight, I take it back with an attack on his rook, and he doesn't have time to move his rook and save it because his other rook is going to be hanging by this knight moving. So this move is +7 for white, and every single other move for white is losing or tying. So the difference between like a great chess player and an average chess player is finding a move like this, because this position demands it. There's literally every single move is a horrible blunder for white except for one, which is a amazing win. Like, he should really resign after this, because, and he thought for like 5 minutes here and said, "Good, what a good move that was." And I said, "Thanks." And he decided on queen here just to complicate things, and I just went with the simple knight takes. If I play queen takes, he plays knight takes, and he's attacking my rook, and I'm attacking his rook, and suddenly it's kind of equal. But I could also play bishop takes knight, but then my knight's kind of hanging, and he could play queen takes knight, and if rook takes, then he can play knight takes rook, and it's interesting. So instead I just take the knight because it's free, and it comes with an attack on the queen, so he has to move the queen, and when he takes my queen, my rook is there to recapture. His knight has no forward mobility because of the position of my bishop. That's why bishops are way better than knights, in my opinion. And now my knight is threatening a fork on his king, which would, when I play check and his king moves, I can win the bishop. Even if his king moves and kills my knight, I win the bishop. And also, this rook is coming down with check, and it's just completely over in this position. And he plays rook to here to get it out of the sight of my bishop, and I just take it, and he resigns because he short-circuited. There's nothing you can do to save this rook. If this rook is dead on the light squares from my bishop, and it's dead on the dark squares from my knight. There's literally nowhere you can move him. If he stays still, he dies. If he moves, he dies. Okay? If you play bishop here, I will check you, and when you move, I will win the knight, or win the bishop, because that's check. Your king's under attack. If you move with an attack on my knight, I win your bishop with an attack on your rook. If you move the rook to attack my bishop, if you kill the knight, I would just take your rook. If you attack my rook and attack my bishop and save your rook, I win this pawn. And then when you try to win the knight, I win this pawn. And then when the rook takes that, I win this knight, because the bishop gets out, and it undermines this knight's position, and then rook takes, and the rooks are coming in. I'm winning on pawns. I have an extra bishop. The game's completely over. Your king's getting attacked. It's over. So Um, as you can see, I'll prove it to you. This is +7 for white. If I played nothing, like king moves, he plays bishop to here and the position's equal. There's nothing happening. But by when he plays b5, there's only an instant I have before he can play the bishop out. I have one chance for this, and it's killer. Even with best play for black, I take with an attack on the rook, and if you try to save your rook, you lose your other one. And this is best play for black. Even if he tries to block out my bishop, it doesn't work because queen takes. And if the bishop takes trying to protect this, then I guess I can just go after this pawn. And you can't defend it because bishop would take. And so my bishop will get out. And yeah, even if he does a better job trying to stop my bishop from getting out, eventually I can just bring my other rook and kill this bishop and prevent the defense of this pawn and get the bishop out this way. But anyways, that's how the game ended, is right here. So, as you can see, the bishop is very powerful on g2, and that's how you beat a good player up. That's how you try to climb up to 2000. So, I hope you learned something. Thanks. All right, how do I get out of this? All right, thank you. I think I start the video and then I start the audio. So I should end the video before the audio.